Some memories don't fade, they calcify, becoming harder and sharper with time until they're like fragments of glass beneath the skin. I was 13 when it happened at Westfield Middle School. Everyone who survived has their own theory about what descended upon our small Oregon town that October afternoon. Government experiment? Interdimensional rift? Collective hallucination? I only know this. Whatever it was, it took 17 people, and those of us who remained were never the same. The morning began with unremarkable clarity. Autumn had painted the mountains surrounding our valley in rust and gold, and a light mist hung over the pines as my mom dropped me off at school. I remember noticing my breath forming small clouds as I joined the stream of preteens filtering through the main entrance. All of us bundled against the morning chill that would burn off by noon. "Hey, Eliza," Mia called, waving from her locker. With her dark hair pulled into a messy bun and her oversized vintage sweater, she looked like she'd stepped out of some indie film about quirky middle schoolers. We'd been inseparable since third grade, bound by our shared love of horror novels and a mutual distaste for the aggressive popularity contests that dominated middle school hierarchies. "Did you finish the bio assignment?" I asked, spinning the combination on my locker. "I swear Dr. Winters is trying to prepare us for med school or something." "Barely, stayed up until midnight labeling cell structures." She lowered her voice. "But did you hear about Mr. Garner, the janitor? What about him?" "Mom says he called in sick again. That's like the 5th time this month. She overheard Mrs. Preston in administration saying he's been acting weird, like standing in empty classrooms talking to himself. Jenna's older brother has night class and saw him walking into the woods behind the football field at like midnight last Tuesday." I shrugged, unimpressed by middle school gossip about the staff. "Maybe he has a secret girlfriend or something." "In the woods at midnight? That's some serial killer stuff, Eliza." "Or he's just weird. Most janitors are." The warning bell rang, sending us scurrying to first period. The morning passed in the usual blur of pre-algebra, history, and English literature, none of which seemed particularly relevant to my 13-year-old existence. By lunch period, the sky had cleared to that particular shade of autumn blue that seems almost artificially bright, and the temperature had risen enough for everyone to abandon their jackets. Lunch at Westfield was divided by an unspoken social geography that everyone understood instinctively. The oval tables nearest the windows belonged to the popular 8th graders. The round tables near the kitchen were for 6th graders and social outcasts. The middle section was neutral territory, populated mainly by unremarkable students like myself and Mia. Neither popular enough to merit window seating, nor awkward enough to be banished to the kitchen perimeter. We sat with our usual group, Mia, myself, Dominic Chen, who everyone called Nicky, and Aaron Whitaker. Nicky was hunched over his worn paperback, dark hair falling across his eyes as he absently picked at his lunch. "What are you reading this time?" Mia asked, dropping her tray onto the table with unnecessary force. Nicky held up the cover. "Something Wicked This Way Comes." "It's about a carnival that comes to town and starts stealing people's souls." "Cheerful," Aaron said, his mouth full of cafeteria pizza. "You ever read anything that doesn't involve death and dismemberment?" "You ever eat anything with your mouth closed?" Nicky shot back. But there was no real animosity in it. Aaron had transferred to Westfield only the previous year, but he integrated into our small group with surprising ease. Tall and lanky, with a shock of red hair, he possessed the kind of effortless athleticism that should have granted him entry to the window tables. Instead, he seemed content with our company, claiming he preferred conversations about Bradbury and Tolkien to discussions of who was dating whom. "We should go to the field," Aaron suggested, glancing outside. "Might be the last decent day before the winter sets in." The rest of us agreed, and after wolfing down our lunches, we headed out to the sports field, where an impromptu game of what the school called Capture the Flag, but everyone else called Kill the Carrier, had already begun. The game was simple. One person carried a football and everyone else tried to tackle them. Whoever succeeded became the new carrier. It was loud, chaotic, and tended to result in at least one minor injury per lunch period, which made it perfect for burning off adolescent energy. I usually avoided participating directly, preferring to watch from the sidelines with Mia and Nikki. But that day, Aaron managed to drag me into the fray. "Come on, Eliza, you can't just observe life forever." After about 15 minutes of running and screaming, Lucas Palmer, a stocky 8th grader with an unfortunate buzz cut, kicked the football with excessive force, sending it sailing over the chain-link fence that separated the field from the dense pine forest that bordered the eastern edge of the school property. "Nice going, Palmer," someone shouted. "Go get it." Lucas scowled. "No way, man. Coach will kill me if I'm late to gym again." "I'll get it," offered Daniel Matthews, a quiet 7th grader who rarely spoke but seemed perpetually eager to please. But Aaron stepped forward before Daniel could move. "I've got it. I need to grab something from my locker anyway." As Aaron jogged toward the fence, Mia nudged me. "Since when does Aaron volunteer for anything?" I shrugged, watching as he scaled the fence with surprising agility and disappeared into the tree line. The rest of us continued playing with someone's sweatshirt rolled into a makeshift ball. But I found myself repeatedly glancing toward the woods, an inexplicable unease building in my stomach. Aaron returned about 5 minutes later, but something was wrong. His face, normally flushed with freckles, had gone chalk white. He moved stiffly, mechanically, his arms hanging unnaturally at his sides. The football was clutched in his right hand, his fingers digging into it with such force that the leather seemed to warp. "Did you find it?" Lucas called, oblivious to Aaron's changed demeanor. Aaron didn't respond. He stood just inside the fence, staring at our group with an expression I couldn't quite identify. Not fear exactly, but a sort of blank intensity that made the hair on my arms stand up. Nikki was the first to approach him. "Aaron, are you okay, man?" Aaron blinked rapidly as if coming out of a trance. He dropped the football and pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. Yeah, I'm fine, just there was something in the woods." "What, like a deer?" someone asked. "No," Aaron shook his head, lowering his hands to reveal eyes that were reddened at the edges. "It wasn't, I don't know what it was, but it was watching me. I could feel it." A few kids laughed nervously, but something in Aaron's voice silenced them quickly. He wasn't joking, and Aaron wasn't the type for dramatic storytelling. "What did it look like?" I asked, moving closer. Aaron's eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw something there I'd never seen before, a kind of fractured awareness, as if part of him had separated from the rest. "It didn't look like anything, Eliza. That's what was wrong. It was just absence, a place where something should be, but wasn't." The warning bell rang, signaling 5 minutes until the end of lunch period. The crowd broke up. kids heading back toward the building, many of them already dismissing Aaron's strange behavior, but Mia, Nikki, and I lingered. "Seriously, what happened?" Nikki asked once the others were out of earshot. Aaron ran a hand through his hair, which was standing up in sweaty spikes. "I really don't know. I went in to get the ball and everything just felt wrong. The air got thick. And then I had this feeling I wasn't alone." He swallowed visibly. Something was right behind me, breathing down my neck. But then, when I turned around, there was nothing there except... "Except what?" Mia prompted when he trailed off. "The trees where I was looking, they were blurry, they were vibrating really fast, and there was this smell like ozone and something rotten." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October air. "Maybe it was just a weird optical illusion, or you stood up too fast and got dizzy?" Aaron's expression hardened slightly. "I know what I felt, Eliza. There was something there, something watching." Nikki glanced toward the tree line, his paperback forgotten in his hand. "Maybe we should check it out after school." "No way," Aaron immediately said, his voice cracking. "I'm never going back in there, and neither should any of you." But of course, we did. The remainder of the lunch period passed without incident, and by fifth period, advanced biology with Dr. Winters, I'd almost convinced myself that Aaron had simply experienced some kind of minor panic attack. It happened sometimes. The woods could be disorienting if you weren't used to them, and the shadows between pine trees played tricks on your eyes. I was labeling a diagram of mitochondria when I first noticed the quality of light in the classroom changing. Dr. Winters was in the middle of explaining cellular respiration, her hands gesturing emphatically, as they always did when she was particularly enthusiastic about a subject. But her movements slowed as the sunlight streaming through the windows began to dim. At first, I assumed it was just clouds passing over the sun, but the darkness continued to deepen, and within minutes, it was as if late evening had suddenly descended. Dr. Winters paused her lecture, crossing to the window with a puzzled expression. "That's strange," she murmured. "The forecast didn't mention any storms today." The entire class had stopped working, all of us watching as the darkness outside intensified until it was almost like night. But there were no clouds visible, no signs of approaching weather, just a gradual, inexplicable dimming, as if someone were slowly turning down the sun. Dr. Winters flipped on the classroom lights, trying to maintain normalcy. "Well, let's continue. As I was saying, the mitochondria convert." She was interrupted by the classroom door flying open. Vice Principal Hargrove stood in the doorway, his typically composed appearance noticeably disrupted. His tie was askew, and a thin sheen of sweat glistened on his forehead despite the cool temperature. "Dr. Winters," he said, his voice tight with controlled panic, "we need to initiate lockdown procedures immediately. Code Yellow." Code Yellow meant shelter in place, usually used for external threats like severe weather or a dangerous situation in the neighborhood. But the abruptness of Hargrove's announcement, combined with his disheveled appearance, sent a ripple of unease through the classroom. "Of course," Dr. Winters replied, her scientific composure never wavering. "Everyone, you know the drill. Away from the windows and stay quiet." But as we began to move to our designated positions, a voice crackled over the PA system. Not the usual measured tones of our principal, Dr. Reynolds, but the panicked voice of Mrs. Preston from the front office. "All staff, immediate code silver. This is not a drill. Repeat, code silver. Lock your..." Her voice cut off abruptly, replaced by a sound that could have been static or something else, something that sounded disturbingly like wet, labored breathing. The blood drained from Dr. Winter's face. Code Silver meant active shooter, the most serious emergency protocol. She moved with sudden urgency, locking the classroom door and switching off the lights. "Everyone against the back wall, now! Stay low and silent." We scrambled to comply, the previous atmosphere of academic focus shattered by primal fear. I found myself wedged between Mia and a girl named Rebecca, our shoulders pressed together as we crouched behind Dr. Winter's desk. Mia's hand found mine in the semi-darkness, her fingers cold and trembling. "What happened?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Before I could answer, a low, resonant sound reverberated through the building. Not like gunshots, but more like the groan of metal under extreme pressure. The floor beneath us seemed to vibrate subtly, and the windows rattled in their frames. Then came the screaming. It started somewhere distant, perhaps the East Wing, but it didn't sound like the frightened scream of students. It was higher, more desperate, with a quality that made my skin crawl, the kind of sound a human might make if they were experiencing something the mind wasn't equipped to process. Dr. Winters held a finger to her lips, though none of us needed the reminder to stay quiet. The darkness outside the windows had become absolute now, not the darkness of night, which still contains subtle gradations and occasional glimmer of stars or distant lights. This was a perfect, impenetrable blackness that seemed to press against the glass like something solid. Minutes passed in tense silence, broken only by the occasional distant sound, another metallic groan, what might have been shattering glass, and once a series of heavy thuds directly above us, as if something massive were moving across the roof. Then the temperature in the room began to drop rapidly. Within seconds, our breath was visible in cloudy puffs, and frost started forming on the windows. Not from the outside in, as it would be normal, but from the inside out, crystalline patterns spreading across the glass like living things. A soft tapping sound began at the classroom door, not the urgent knocking of someone seeking refuge, but a deliberate, almost contemplative rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. Dr. Winters motioned for us to stay absolutely still. The tapping continued for what felt like eternity, but was probably only 30 seconds, then stopped abruptly. The door handle turned slowly, testing the lock. Finding it secured, whatever was outside seemed to lose interest. We heard what sounded like wet, shuffling footsteps moving away down the corridor. The relief in the room was palpable, but short-lived, because that's when the lights began to flicker, and in the strobing effect that followed, I saw something that I've spent years trying to rationalize away. The darkness outside the windows wasn't just absent of light, it was moving, flowing, pulsing with a rhythm that suggested respiration, and pressed against the glass was what appeared to be a hand, but not any hand that could belong to a human being. It had too many joints, the fingers too long and boneless, like pale worms pressed flat against the surface. I must have made some small sound because Dr. Winter's head whipped around toward the windows. In the brief moment before the lights failed completely, I saw her face transform from professional composure to pure, unadulterated terror. Then we were in darkness with only the faint emergency lights in the hallway providing any illumination at all. The temperature continued to plummet until it hurt to breathe, the air so cold it burned in my lungs. "Everyone, stay calm," Dr. Winters whispered, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her own fear. "This is just a power failure. The emergency generators will—" Something heavy crashed against our door with enough force to splinter the wood around the frame. Rebecca began to sob quietly beside me, and I felt Mia's nails digging painfully into my palm. The crashing came again, and this time the door frame visibly buckled. "Back corner," Dr. Winters hissed, gesturing urgently toward the supply closet. "Everyone, now!" We scrambled across the room just as the door gave way with a sound like a gunshot. In the confusion and darkness, I couldn't see what entered, but the temperature dropped so severely that my eyelashes froze together when I blinked. There was a rushing sound, like a reverse vacuum, as if all the air was being sucked out of the room at once. "Into the closet!" Dr. Winters shouted, abandoning any pretense of quiet. She was physically pushing students now, her previous composure replaced by a desperate urgency. "Go, go, go!" We plied into the supply closet, a space designed for microscopes and lab specimens. Not 20 terrified teenagers. Dr. Winters was the last one in, pulling the door shut behind her with a decisive click. In the pitch blackness of the closet, pressed against my classmates' bodies, I could hear nothing but ragged breathing and Rebecca's continued quiet sobbing. Seconds stretched into minutes, and the only sound from the classroom beyond was a periodic, wet, slithering noise that made me think of slugs crawling across the glass. Then, a new sound, a voice, but so distorted that it barely registered as human. "Dr. Winters," it gurgled, the syllables stretched and warped like taffy. "We know you're in there." It was Mr. Garner's voice, the janitor, who'd been acting strangely, but wrong in ways I couldn't articulate, as if his vocal cords were being manipulated by something that didn't understand how human speech worked. Dr. Winters' breathing quickened beside me, but she remained silent. "We just want to talk," the voice continued, closer now. "We're curious about your species." A heavy thud against the closet door made everyone flinch. Something was being dragged across the surface, something wet and viscous that made a squeaking sound against the wood. "You study life forms, yes? So do we. Come out, and we can exchange notes." The door handle began to turn slowly, inexorably. Dr. Winters pressed her weight against it, but the mechanism continued to rotate, as if the laws of physics were being selectively ignored. Just as the latch disengaged, the building's emergency sirens activated with an ear-splitting wail. The pressure against the door immediately ceased, and we heard what sounded like a frustrated hiss, followed by rapid, heavy movement away from the closet. For what seemed like hours, we remained huddled in that closet, listening to the sirens and the occasional distant sound that could have been anything from collapsing infrastructure to human screams. The emergency lights failed at some point, leaving us in absolute darkness. When the door finally opened, it was Police Chief Marston standing there, his normal, ruddy face ashen, his uniform torn at the shoulder. Behind him stood officers in tactical gear, looking like they'd just emerged from a war zone. "Is anyone hurt?" Chief Marston asked, his voice rough. We shook our heads mutely, too shocked to speak. "Good, we're evacuating the building. Stay together, don't look in any of the classrooms, and for God's sake, don't touch anything." The official explanation came 3 days later. A gas leak had caused mass hallucinations and hysteria throughout the school. The structural damage was attributed to unexpected settling of the foundation due to recent seismic activity. The 17 missing people, including Mr. Garner, Vice Principal Hargrove, Mrs. Preston, and 14 students, were classified as victims of dissociative fugue, a psychological condition where people suddenly travel away from home and assume new identities. None of them was ever found. The media coverage was minimal and oddly muted. A small article appeared in the local paper, focusing primarily on the school board's swift response and the temporary relocation of classes to the community center. National news never picked up the story at all. But we knew, those of us who had been there, who had heard that voice and felt that unnatural cold, we knew it wasn't a gas leak or mass hysteria. Whatever had come to Westfield that day wasn't from our world, or perhaps wasn't even from our reality. In the weeks that followed, teams of people in hazmat suits combed through the school building and the surrounding woods. Black SUVs with tinted windows and no license plates parked outside affected students' homes. Men and women in crisp suits conducted wellness interviews that felt more like interrogations. Did you directly observe any unidentified individuals? Did you experience missing time? Have you noticed any unusual physical symptoms since the incident? When the high school finally reopened 2 months later, it wasn't the same place. Parts of the East Wing had been completely remodeled, with no explanation for the changes. And the woods behind the football field were now surrounded by a high fence topped with barbed wire. Security cameras monitored every entrance and hallway. And there were other subtler changes. The water fountains were removed, replaced with bottled water stations. The biology curriculum was revised to eliminate the unit on evolutionary adaptation. A new school counselor appeared, Dr. Weiss, who seemed particularly interested in students who reported unusual dreams or persistent memories of the incident. Aaron was never quite the same. The vibrant, talkative boy who loved sports and science fiction became withdrawn, his eyes constantly darting to corners and shadows as if anticipating something's appearance. During one of Dr. Weiss's mandatory counseling sessions, Aaron apparently disclosed that he'd seen what they really looked like in the woods that day, and the next week his family relocated to Arizona for his father's new job opportunity. We never heard from him again. Mia and I navigated the aftermath together, sharing nightmares in hushed phone calls and creating elaborate codes to discuss our theories without alerting whatever monitoring systems we were certain had been installed in our homes. Nicky threw himself into research, spending hours in the library studying theoretical physics and fringe scientific journals, convinced that what happened could be explained by concepts like dimensional permeability and non-Euclidean infiltration. As for me, I developed a sensitivity to cold that doctors couldn't explain. Even on mild days, my right hand The one that had been pressed against the closet door remains several degrees cooler than the rest of my body, and sometimes when I'm alone in dark places, I hear that wet, slithering sound as if something is dragging itself across the floor behind me. 23 years have passed since that October afternoon. I've earned degrees in biology and comparative anatomy. I've published papers on evolutionary adaptation in extreme environments. I've built a career studying the very subject that Dr. Winters was teaching when our world changed forever, and I've never stopped looking for answers. Last month, I received an unmarked envelope containing only a flash drive and a handwritten note. You were right. They're still here. Still watching, still collecting specimens. The drive contained hundreds of files, incident reports spanning decades from small towns across America, gas leaks, mass hysteria, unexplained structural damage, missing persons who were never found, all following the same pattern, all featuring the same inexplicable darkness, the same unnatural cold, the same distorted voices calling from behind locked doors. Tonight, as I compile this account, there's a strange quality in the air in my apartment, a heaviness, a subtle pressure change that makes my ears pop. The lights have been flickering intermittently for the past hour. And outside my window, the darkness seems deeper than usual, more absolute, like it's watching, waiting, remembering, like it's coming back for the specimens it missed. Thanks for listening to my Dark Veil tale. Make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. It really does help me grow this channel so I can make more content for your enjoyment. Also, check out the linked video for another creeper-style story from Dark Veil Tales.